Greetings all. Dr. Raphael X here with my friend Dr. Eric Manuel Torres from Australia. We're here talking about his new book. And please subscribe, click on the like button, notifications button, all that good stuff. Leave a comment. Yes. Well, before anything else, let's begin with the sign of the cross, shall we? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Remembering our baptism there. All right. So Dr. Torres here, friend of mine, which we recently got LinkedIn, and just give a little brief kind of tutorial here that Dr. Eric Manuel Torres is a Catholic moral theologian and bioethicist with a background in healthcare. Based in Melbourne, Australia, he has recently completed a doctorate from Catholic Theological College, University of Divinity. He holds a Bachelor of Health Sciences and a Master of Orthoptics from La Trobe University, a Master of Nursing Science from the University of Melbourne, a graduate diploma of theology and a Master of Theological Studies from Catholic Theological College, all the same one, University of Divinity, and a graduate certificate of specialist inclusive education from Deakin University. He also holds a certificate in business administration. Moreover, Dr. Torres has published a number of articles appearing in several scholarly publications, including Homiletic and Pastoral Review, and the Journal of Religion and Health. Very interesting about the author. Some of the words there I may have not, said well. But basically, we're here talking about his new book, a short book, Curing and Healing, which the vital elements of Catholic healthcare. And this is definitely a vital book, we can say, for today, for contemporary concerns, especially because there's a crisis kind of in bioethics and sound Catholic bioethics. I think a lot of it is just very much subjectivized according to the intention. That's how I learned it when I at least studied my bachelor's for bioethics, where there's kind of the denial of objective reality. So I think here, Dr. Eric Manuel Torres is kind of here to instill us with this sound Catholic healthcare morality, basically. But yeah, if you can expound a little bit on yourself, on the book, what kind of drove you to write the book, and like that, if you wouldn't mind.
Firstly, it's a great honor, Dr. Rafael Gonzalez,
Yes.
to be on your program, and thank you for the wonderful intro, and thank you for your friendship. A little bit about myself. Yes, the intro was pretty full about my academic background. I'll give you just a little bit about the context. So yes, I started in healthcare. So since a little child, I've been always thinking about entering healthcare, being a doctor or something along those lines. When I finished high school, I entered orthoptics, which is a vision science. Also, of course, if we know orthodox, straight, optics, eyes. So that's why we have our friends here. So I'm always interested in eyes and vision, and always see ortho vision, correct vision. And this expands both into the healthcare and into our theological bioethical perspectives. In terms of after what I did that, I also entered nursing because I wanted to be more holistic in my approach into the human person in terms of the medical healthcare aspects. But as I was also entering more deeply into my faith around that stages, I encountered Catholic bioethics writers, and I thought, this is marvelous. This is really marvelous. I mean, I understand what you're saying. The secular perspective in both the philosophical sphere and particularly the bioethical sphere is really lacking, and they don't have a real solid grounding. Even the ideas of principalism, which was taught in my very lightly in both orthoptics and nursing, is a bit pie in the sky things, because it is not based on anything. You can use the four principles of principalism to basically sustain any argument, even contrary to each other. So, when I entered, I became knowing about Catholic bioethics and that perspective. I thought, wonderful! This is what I was always looking for: a perfect hybrid, a perfect merger between my love of healthcare and my love of the faith that I was able going deeper into. So I went to do theology. I thought I was going to do a grad dip. I went to do the full master's. This is where this comes along. And now I've recently finished, just of a month or so ago, my doctorate. So I've been approved, I've been passed. And my doctorate was in regarding consciential rejection in the perspective of the abortion debate that happened here in Victoria.
Fascinating, fascinating. No, it's I mean, definitely, I would say the world, the Orthodox world, we can say, definitely takes your book in and with great admiration and acceptance, because again, this is a topic that there are many challenges today to bioethics and Catholic bioethics. I was wondering if maybe two questions I have basically that what concrete challenges do you see today for sound Catholic bioethics, whether certain issues or philosophical mentalities? Like what basically is the problem, and what is it that your book contributes anew? Like what contribution does it give in the realm of bioethics?
Yes. Thank you so much for your question, Dr. Gonzalez. If I may, let me pick on your recently published book as well on the two Catholic doctrine developments according to the ideas of Francisco Suarez. There, you mentioned two interesting things. I think these two interesting things is a perfect segue to what I want to say in response to these two questions. The idea of who we are, our anthropology, is marked by our idea of who Christ is. You very nicely put how we see Christ is how we see man, and vice versa. And I think that's part of the answer to your first question. We have lost the perspective of who Christ is. We see this in the Protestant church, but we also see this, unfortunately, within our Catholic world, within our fellow worshippers in the pews at Mass and so forth. Oh, and particularly those who are not at Mass. Those sort of counterfeit Christs have, the Christ who approves everything, the Christ who is just your jolly friend and so forth. I'm not saying he's not your friend, but he's also our Lord and Savior. That's key. We need to remember that. And he was the true man, the second Adam. So as such, only from that perspective can we see who we are as human beings, made in the Imago Dei, made in his likeness and image. So if we can't, think about a carpenter. If the carpenter doesn't know what wood is, how is he going to build a table? If we are healthcare practitioners, we are working not on wood, but on the human person, immensely more valuable than wood, of course. So how are we going to treat the human person if we don't have sound anthropology? And I would argue the only sound anthropology is that which is Christocentric. And for that, we need to understand who Christ is. For your second question, you also mentioned that in your book, that doctrine develops organically, and it is the words, how we think about things that actually develops in man, in our thinking, and that thinking is expressed through expressions of word. And this is where the curing and healing comes in, the title, the terminology. In my background in healthcare, we use curing and healing a lot, even interchangeably. You have wound healing. We got this medicine cures this whatever disease or infirmity or condition. And they're used, as I said, interchangeably. However, my instinct as a Christian, my instinct as a Catholic told me there must be something deeper. There must be a deeper meaning here. Having doing more research and think, yes, even secular authors ascribe a difference between curing and healing, even though that many lay people and even those in healthcare professions sometimes don't stick strictly to those definitions. And I can go further into what each of them means, but to answer your question, what I'm putting on the table here is an argument that these definitions need to be conserved, they need to be observed, because whilst different, they also go hand in hand, particularly for Catholic healthcare, because we have not only the body to treat, we also have the soul. We are an amalgamate between soul and body, so it will be insufficient and many times to just look at the body without looking at the soul of the person. Because of course their eternal salvation may be put at risk. So here we have a sociological dimension as well, which I also want to express in my work. It's also wanting to inspire healthcare workers, particularly those who are Christian and Catholic, to take on their mission. Christ said to heal the sick, to cure the sick. So I want to just spur them on and tell them, you're doing a marvelous job, and this is something to boost your efforts, a better understanding of what we're doing here. So although perhaps the distinction is nothing new, I'm not reinventing the wheel in that sense. I am making it clear, and I'm trying to express it for the people in the here and now, in the issues that we are facing today in Catholicism and bioethics more broadly.
Right, right. No, it's I think you've mentioned some really interesting points. I think how you mentioned other kind of this promotion of counterfeit Christology is really
Mhm,
spot on. And now it's based on really an unsound anthropology. And really, we
mhm.
cannot deal with man if we don't know what man is. I mean, that's such a
Correct.
basic principle. So that's spot on. And I think there's a kind of reductionism. You see this
Mhm,
a lot in psychology where it's very much materialistic,
mhm,
because man is a body. So the philosophy that underlies this reductionism in the sciences, or rather in the medical practices,
mhm,
is materialism. So you see that in psychology, and here with healthcare, you're seeing curing and healing strictly in a materialistic sense. So I think
mhm,
that's really
mhm,
good that really the curing and healing has to be something that's integral to man, as man is body and soul, created and redeemed
mhm,
by God. So really that's absolutely essential. And really uh, even kind of like these materialists, they use Christ as a model, but in, again, as you mentioned, in a counterfeit way, because I think we have to remember that Christ did heal, but really the healings they had a transcendent purpose. The transcendent purpose was to
yes.
bring them to Christ, to reveal them the immaterial realities. So really, it's like
Mhm,
a healing for its own sake in a way, yes, but no, because it's ordered to the transcendent reality, supernatural, immutable reality. But
mhm.
yeah, spot on. So that's great. Can you talk about some of those vital elements of Catholic healthcare mentioned in your book? Or for example, like
Yeah. Mhm,
what makes healthcare specifically Catholic? Is it just that kind of being animated with Christology, or what does that look like in the
mhm.
concrete? Or what is that, or yeah, basically, what is that? What's the difference between a Catholic healthcare and just
Yes.
regular healthcare, if you will? If you haven't addressed that already, or if you want to kind of add to that.
Mhm. That's an excellent question, Dr. Gonzalez, and I think this goes back also to the crux of what I'm trying to show in my work. I'll need to take a step. I need to take a step back first, and first to clarify between the distinction curing and healing, so we can actually go into what these vital elements are. Um, in a nutshell, curing is one-dimensional. It is almost mechanical, the restoration of the body. Sometimes it happens naturally. Sometimes it is aided by intervention, be that by a nurse or a doctor and so forth. But it is mechanical and only works on the bodily, corporal dimension of man. Healing, however, is multifaceted. It is multidimensional. It is a process. It can incorporate the body, but sometimes it doesn't. We see that in terminal illness. The cure, you can't really cure a terminal person, they're terminal. But you can still help them. You can help them spiritually, you can help them emotionally, you can help them familially. And this is the all other dimensions that healing also encompasses. So, and this is why I use the narrative, the story of the woman with the issue of blood found in the Synoptic Gospels, and I particularly go into Luke's version of that in Luke 8. And if you wish, I can go deeper into that and what insights we can get from that narrative later. But to your question, what makes Catholic healthcare Catholic? And we can see this. Sometimes we see hospitals, just like schools, that have the Catholic banner, but you go inside them and they're not much different from the secular. I would argue this, and taking insights from the Dominican doctor Ostraco, he points to 4 key things. Of course, I'm adding curing and healing to those 4. So I would argue that the curing and healing are the 2 wings, just like faith and reason are 2 wings. I'm saying curing and healing are 2 wings essential for Catholic healthcare to fly. But Ostraco also makes a very good point in the practical. He says the healthcare practitioners have to, and this probably extends beyond the healthcare practitioners to administrators and those who are running the hospital as well. They must love as Christ does. They must be that good Samaritan. They must be that neighbor to the infirm, to those who need help. Second point is they must do every action as an action of love for God. So not only see, as Mother Teresa saw, the Imago Dei in every person very clearly, but also use that as motivation so as to make every act an act of love towards God. Every time I see a patient, every time I cure a wound, every time I give medication or minister medication to a patient, I'm doing this as an act of love for them, for who they are. Third point is always uphold the gospel of life. And we're not only talking about the gospel of life as the encyclical that St. John Paul gave us, but the gospel of life holistically, meaning defending life from beginning to end, natural conception to natural end. We're talking about respecting the human dignity of each person, no matter in what state they're found, because as a healthcare, you see them sometimes in their worst day of their lives. Still, their dignity has not been blemished. And fourthly, is prayer and more prayer. We cannot be Christ-like. We cannot imitate Christ if we don't imitate him in prayer as well. So for us, healthcare workers, physicians, nurses, allied health, administrators in hospitals, I urge prayer. I urge you to look at people as other Christ, to look yourself as the Good Samaritan, to love every person in every act you do. Make every act a little prayer to God, and always uphold the dignity and the gospel of life.
Right. No, that's yeah, it's beautiful to reflect We could do this interview on our knees, just pray, like a meditation. That's
Mhm,
yeah, it's beautiful, but definitely prayer needs to imbue
mhm,
everything. What I do see in the healthcare field, those who work there, um, and I'm not sure if your book, because I just read not the whole thing. It's very
mhm.
accessible. Get the book. It's 110 pages. You told me 100 something pages.
It's a little under than that. It's actually, if I can tell you,
Mhm.
the print version is only 77 pages of actual readable text, and
Okay.
probably 80 something pages if you count the front bits and the front matters. So it's really accessible. It's double space. It's an easy read. You can probably read it in hour, max hour and a half if you are a steady reader. So
All
go
right.
ahead, please.
No, I will definitely I'll leave the links for the book for both en route, because if you're in the
Mhm,
US or in Europe, it might be better to get it directly from the publisher. Or if you're in that side of the world, because he's from, Dr. Torres is in Australia, you can get it on Amazon. So I'll leave the links there in the comment section. But I want to talk about this notion of truth, because we're kind of living
mhm,
in today's society where yeah, they talk about love. Love is kind of overemphasized,
mhm,
and everyone talks about love. Everyone wants to love, but the love
mhm,
that is divorced from truth, and especially in the realm of bioethics, where
mhm,
truth is not so much objective. So in bioethics, we learn in Catholic, in Orthodox Catholic bioethics, we learn the
mhm,
three aspects of the moral act: object, circumstances,
mhm,
and intention. And really, the
mhm,
first thing you have to look at to judge the act is the object, to see the what the person does, right? Because that's what the will directly wants. But even before the
mhm,
end or the intention, directly wants the object. But you're seeing a so-called love kind of getting away from that and almost seeing that as a hindrance to love. The belief in an objective morality as again an obstacle to love, that love involves affirmation. And we're seeing this run amok totally with the kind of the
mhm,
transgender mentality, which is very much transitioning to the healthcare field, where you're having these type of surgeries, which we were talking about before, where you just subjectively auto affirm the other person, and that is equated with loving them, as opposed to believing in some type of objective
mhm.
reality. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, if you.
Certainly. We have a crisis in truth, and words, as important as they are being dissipated and they're being watered down and their meaning is being lost. Um, as you said very pointedly, love is being used in a myriad of ways which aren't what we mean by love. And healthcare is being used, the term, and the act as well, is being used to defend things which, from our Catholic Christian perspective, and I would say any person who defends the dignity of life, cannot see as healthcare: euthanasia, abortion, and gender transition surgeries and so forth. This is not real healthcare. We need to maybe a talk for another time, but we need to see what is the medical act. What does it mean to do the medical act? So I would argue just very briefly here that those are not medical acts. Um, 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 if I
Mhm.
can go back,
Mhm.
I use the story of the woman with the issue of blood, the hemorrhoisa, as to use the more technical term, as the biblical grounding to this distinction I make in my book. And I think it is pertinent that we actually have a little bit of a discussion of this story in order to see what truth is and what is, and how these truth and curing and healing interact. Um, so if we are familiar with the story, we find it in the three synoptic gospels. I concentrate mostly on Luke's account, which is in chapter 8, but you can also find it in Mark chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 9. And so the story goes as follows. My way how I would render it is this. Um, Christ is is following Jairo because his daughter is sick. So we got a prominent, if I'm not confused, Pharisee. His daughter is sick, so Christ is going to go following the crowd and so forth to try to heal Jairo's daughter. On the way, whilst all the crowd is being amassed, probably a little bit chaotic because everyone's pressing each other and so forth, this woman secretly, quietly approaches. This woman has been suffering from a sort of gynecological bleeding for 12 years. And 12 years is important because this is the number of completeness. She has suffered enough. We know that through what the Gospels tell us, she has gone to doctors, used all her money, and has not found any solution, no cure to her bleeding. But because of her bleeding, she's being exiled. She's being outcast from society. Not only is she just a little bit Jackie, just to use that term, but she's ritually impure. She can't perform her duties, her religious duties, because of the sort of blood that she's having, the sort of bleeding that she's having. So she's outcast. She's lost her money. She's destitute. She's hears that there's this preacher, there's this rabbi that says they can do miracles. In a way, I have nothing to lose, she might be thinking. So she approaches bravely among the crowd. She's probably shouldering people to move forward. And secretly, on her knees, because she touches the tassels, she must be lowered, touches the tassels of Christ. And that moment, Christ feels power coming out of him. He asks, "Who touched me?" Peter says to him, "Master, we are all squeezed here like sardines, and you are asking us, who touched you? We are all rubbing to each other." "No, I felt power come out." "Who touched me?" We're talking about a real touch, not just rubbing on each other. The woman comes out, and there she is. The gospel tells us that from the moment that the power was released from Christ, from the moment she touched the tassels of his garments, her bleeding stopped. That is the curing. Her bleeding stopped. Her biological, her anatomical, her physiological issue has been restored. But the story could have ended there, but it doesn't. Christ looks at her, and whilst the narrative doesn't record the conversation, we see that the gospel says that she told him all truth. And this is where we're going to in truth. She told him all truth. And in that discussion, Christ says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well," or "your faith has healed you," depending on what translation you go into. "Go in peace." She is healed with the human interaction, with the true man, of course, but there's that human interaction. Not only has her body been fixed, her bleeding stopped, but her concerns, her anxieties, her dignity as a human person has been restored. As I said, she was ritually impure. Theoretically, whoever she touched, whatever she touched, would be also made impure. But Christ, being God in the flesh, cannot get impure. On the contrary, Christ purifies whatever is touched with him. And this is that power. That is the real touch. So what is this truth? This is the truth of loving as Christ did, sacrificially. loving the person as who they are, body and soul, not for what they can give you, not for what they can pay you. This is objectifying the person. We see this in society and highly, I suppose, sexualized society. We see people as objects. Saint John Paul reminds us, use objects, love people. And I think this is being lost in our bioethics. We see sometimes, we refer to patients in the healthcare as their disease, as their condition. This is bed 9 is the person with the broken leg, and bed 12 is the person with the heart attack. We don't see them as John. We don't see them as Mary. We don't see them as the persons they are. We have reduced them to their condition. So if we can see them as the human persons they are, I think we can take care of them in a better, more holistic, more rounded way. And this is the truth. This is the truth. This is the truth in love. So we need to just see the imago Dei in people, in a nutshell. That's it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I say, I mean, love cannot be divorced from truth, which
Correct.
Christ himself. And you wrote a really interesting article on I Am the Truth, Brief Catholic Ponderings on Truth in Homiletic and Pastoral Review. You have other articles there. Very beautiful that, yeah, Christ really is the basis of truth. And even when he says, the truth will set you free, you can kind of tie that in, which it seems like you do, to is really the truth that heals, right? The truth that's
Yes.
setting you free in the sense of healing. So if I understand this correctly, so curing, you're saying, is pure, you say is one dimensional usually, but
Correct.
healing has that transcendent aspect of
Correct.
going beyond the one dimensional and being the uh, kind of going beyond the bodily, if you will, if I'm understanding you.
Correct.
So that's yeah, do you address by kind of like there's studies that show, and there's this doctor, I forget his name now, for Peter, I forget, he actually shows that how the brain who believes in God is actually different from the brain who doesn't believe in God, kind of the unity of
Mm.
soul and body scientifically shown, and how even in prayer can heal us bodily. I think there's studies shown
Mhm.
on this, different polls, well, from the effects also that really those patients who have prayed have actually come out better, right? Or have been
Mhm.
actually healed. So that unity
Mhm.
of body and soul. And I always love the sacrament because I teach sacraments too on the high school level.
Mhm.
And I love teaching the sacrament of anointing of the sick, where that has
Mhm.
the healing, the natural healing, with the obviously the healing of the soul from sin, but the
Mhm.
natural healing also, where you can be naturally healed from this sacrament. So we're
Mhm.
seeing, because man, it's almost difficult to tell in a person like what pertains to the soul, what pertains to the body, especially in the psychological realm, because the unity is so, not that they're blurred, there's a distinction, but the unity is so profound that it's, again, it's difficult to say what pertains to what. Um, so is there a type of overlap here? I mean, I know this is kind of profound anthropological question, but I was wondering what
Mhm.
you think. Is there kind of overlap here? Or like, how is it that something can heal? How can healing be multi-dimensional or bidimensional? In the sense, is healing the body healing the soul? Is healing the soul healing the body? Is there type of overlap
Mhm.
or yeah,
Yes.
basically that. Hmm.
A very fascinating question, and Dr. Gonzalez, and I can take this in multiple directions. Um, so from our Catholic perspective, we know instinctively that we are a body-soul union. When that body-soul union separates, that's called death. Um, so you can't treat the body without treating the soul. You can't touch the soul without somehow affecting the body. Um, and we see this and I love your example of the anointing of the sick. I'll go as much to say that this is more profoundly seen in the Eucharist when we receive the body and blood, soul, and
Right.
divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. This is food for the body, but moreover, food for the soul. And we see this, and now, if a person is lucky enough to receive the last Eucharist, the Beaticum, we see this prominently in the Beaticum because they are receiving that food for the journey. So we are trying to give belief to the body, food, nourishment, but also directing them into the next step into their journey. So we can go into that route of what it means from a Catholic perspective. But it's also very interesting what you say about those studies. And whilst the name doesn't ring a bell of this, I know of numerous studies. There's actually a handbook that I've not so long ago bought, and I forget the name of the lead author, Kogan, something like that. I'm probably butchering the name. Sorry, but he has published a third edition, I believe, of this handbook about how healthcare and spirituality are intertwined. I believe it's Oxford Press. Big chunky book reviewing thousands of studies of how in different areas, mental health, physical health, cardiology, psychology, and so forth, how this intertwine is visible. Because we have a time right now in modern medicine where talk about spirituality, talk about faith, talk about prayer, many doctors who are highly secularized, not all of them, but many are, just reject that up front. Don't even think about it, don't even consider it. They may respect patients' views, but they themselves are cold. They themselves don't think much about it and think about, okay, this is just medieval beliefs or whatever it is. But this work of this researcher, very prominent in this field, and I'm sorry that I just can't remember the name off the top of my head.
Is it Newberg by any chance? Is it Andrew Newberg? Because that's actually
no, it's with K.
Okay. Okay.
So if I knew I would have had the handbook here with me. I got it in the other room. But he goes into quite length, and he's dedicated an abundant part of his research life, decades, to having peer-reviewed articles in medical journals saying, no, there's interaction. Even if you're not religious, you must see that there's a reality to these interactions. Because you can't have these sort of findings, let's say, you can try to explain it in many ways. You can explain it in a non-religious, in a materialistic way still. You can say people who have faith are more resilient. You can say people who have more faith are likely to be in communities, making them exercise more, or maybe decreasing their chances of being smokers because they are in community which have health at the forefront. Maybe if you are an alcoholic or a drug addict, having that support group around you helps you cut the habit. So you can try to explain it in those secular materialistic ways as well. But there's also that other layer that we know that it's the spirit working. We know it's this prayer working. And I think doctors actually know this, but they don't want to really say about it because there's such thing as psychosomatic conditions. Sometimes the brain, our thinking can affect how we feel. And we sometimes feel in our guts. We literally, when we're too nervous, our gut sometimes go haywire. And so forth. But we also have to see there's another science. And I don't want to go too much into this, but there's also the area of parapsychology. Many people think about, oh, that's wacky things. People think about spoon bending and Yuri Geller and things like that, and telepathy and things like that. Of course, those things are studied by parapsychology. But one thing that parapsychology emphasizes, and I think this is wonderful, is that there is something beyond the body we see. Be it spiritual or not, there's something beyond the body we see And this can be researched. And this can be in one way or another, maybe not 100% scientifically measured, but it can be at least somehow quantified.
Right.
So there is that sort of other direction we can go at. Thirdly, or maybe fourthly, I want to just highlight some research that myself and the lead authors of this psychological research and Gertrude Cosmas in Malaysia. I've collaborated with her a few times. We, in certain of our research, we look at how Christian faith affects happiness and resilience. We see that particularly, we're using the context of the pandemic and university students, but this can be extrapolated in other contexts. We know as Christians, as both Catholics, we know that having the faith makes us more resilient. But saying that won't convince many people. We need to get numbers, we need to get statistics, we need to get this research out there and published in reputable journals. And this is what one of the things we are doing. This is a little drop in the ocean, of course, but we're saying the faith, be it just because of psychological resistance or be it because there's actually power in prayer and in community and so forth. However you look at it, Christians are happier. Christians are more resilient. And I think this is important research among what other people are doing wonderful in this space as well. But I think this is important research saying the faith cannot be dismissed in healthcare. It's not just the idiosyncratic belief of a person. These beliefs of the person, particularly the Catholic belief, the true faith, can have real impact onto healthcare provision. Prayer can help people. And even if there is no bodily cure, this is the sociological aspect. Healing is sociological. There is a potential of making amends and finding salvation still.
Yeah, I love how you allude to the Eucharist, which is, I mean, it's spot on in the sense that God, even though God is the first cause of all things, God is the one who heals. Really, God who heals us
Correct.
through secondary causes, which he wills. So you would have sometimes people will fall into like an extreme type of, I'll call it spiritualism or supernaturalism, say, well, I just go directly to God. But God wants these secondary causes. We are bodily. He wants medicine. The saints founded, like Padre Pio, he founded a hospital. So it's not like, oh, God will do it directly. God wants through the body to cure us integrally through secondary causes. It's kind of like that saying, God doesn't want to constantly work miracles. He lets us, and that's why freedom has a tremendous responsibility in the moral realm.
Yes.
He wants us to cooperate with him,
Mm-hmm.
even though he himself, all glory is his, and all
Amen.
the curing comes from him ultimately. But really that interesting aspect that since we're not spiritual beings, there is no direct spiritual connection, we can say. I mean, there is in the supernatural realm, but naturally speaking, we go through the bodily. We go through the bodily, just like as the sacraments, God established the sacraments according to our nature. It's like the healing is according to our nature through the bodily. It's almost like as if medicine were sacramental. Everything is sacramental in the sense that it's symbolic,
Correct.
which symbolizes something deeper. But I don't know if you go into that aspect, that sacramentality of, listen, this is all symbolic, and really the reality deep down is kind of is the immutable, unchangeable reality, which the symbolic and changeable should lead us towards. So yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that. Also, kind of any on a side note here, well, which is important, any future projects, if you could talk about like what you're going to publish and things like that, and then I want to ask you a really concrete, your view on a concrete bioethical view, which is pretty it's pretty important. But go ahead. I don't know if you want to comment
Yes.
out there.
Another fabulous question, Dr. Gonsalves. Let me start by pointing out, you mentioned that yes, God wants us to do things. He's the creator, he's the lead author, he's the principal actor, but we are second actors in philosophy. In talking in philosophy, we are second actors. We are cooperators with him. This is why God is so loving to us, because even as mere creatures, he wants us to cooperate with him, which is just marvelous when you think about it. In terms of the development of hospitals, the modern day hospital all leads back to Christianity. The Greco-Romantic world had a very different view of disease, had a very different view of what a person being sick was. If you're sick, you're left in the street. You're nothing. If you can't help yourself, why am I going to help you? Having that view that no, we need to look at each other as fellow men, as neighbors, see the Imago Dei, is very Christian. And I can't emphasize that enough. This is a very Christian development, the hospital. The first hospitals were developed by the ancient church. Because we see the Imago Dei. We're not going to leave these sick people, these infirm, disabled people on the street to die. We need to do something about it. Even if we can't help them very much materially, at least let's give them a dignified end, in the sense that we are going to take care of them until God calls them. So it is a Christian development. And many people have forgotten that they don't see that a hospital is a Christian development. Wow. And we see this in secular vision of what the hospital system is, particularly in economical perspective. The next thing is that you mentioned, and this is quite wonderful, is that because God cooperates with us, he wants us to be his hands and feet in the world. And there's this passage, I think it's chapter 38 of the book of Jesus ben Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, where he talks about the physician. And depending on what translation you look at, you have this duality of who is actually doing the healing. If you look at, for example, the New Revised Standard Version, it talks about the physician. It's the physician that heals and takes away pain. But if you go into the New Revised Version, particularly the Catholic Second Edition, the translation does not say the physician. It says he, referring to God. He heals and takes away the pain. Which translation is correct? Both of them are.
Right.
Because it is both God and the physician, through being a channel of God, who takes away the pain and does the healing. And we see this beautifully in these sort of two translations of it.
No, that's if I could just chime in here, that's beautiful, because it's kind of like people think that they're mutually exclusive. The primary cause, supernatural causation, and a natural secondary cause. No, you have to have you know, you can't have both of them at the same time, but you can have both, which is very good. Yeah, that's spot on.
Yes, and this is the thing. For a Catholic or even a Christian healthcare practitioner, this should animate them. I am being a channel of God's love. Me, a humble creature, being a channel of God's healing. What more wonderful, what more dignified, what more, beautiful profession can you enter? Of course, there's many other professions. Teaching, you're taking the steps of the divine master.
Right.
And other things, you're also helping people. But I think in healthcare, there's this intimacy that you don't find elsewhere. And here we are following the steps of Christ as the divine physician. So I think there's this really important thing we need to always emphasize, particularly for those who are fellow Catholics, for those who are fellow Christians, to say, this profession is not a profession. Yes, it is a profession, but it's a vocation
Right.
as much as the priestly vocation is. In fact, in the ancient world, priests and healers, doctors and so forth were very intertwined. And we see this in the medical symbol, the snake intertwined on the staff. Um, um, you asked about future projects.
Oh, if I could just to chime in real quick, that's why I mean that's really if you go into this field, this is one of the type of fields, if you go in just to like make money, you're going to be miserable because as you said,
Mm,
this is a vocation. I mean, you
mm,
have to really love what you do. It's not like,
mm,
an office job, not to diminish any type of work, but it's not like
of
an
course.
office job where you're data entry or something like that. It's just this is something where and I never understood that how people can go into that field with not actually loving that field. It's similar to
Mm-hmm,
teaching in that respect also. Uh,
mm-hmm,
you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a passion for it because you're not going to, and you do see, unfortunately, people like this in the medical field, and they themselves would tell you that they're miserable. They're miserable where they
mm-hmm,
don't see the person as an end, but rather as kind of a means to their comfort and not. I knew of a nurse,
mm-hmm,
she 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 I mean, I don't want to say she's evil, but she definitely has some evil ill will towards the patients. Like she would
mm-hmm,
want them to pass. She would want them to die. So it would kind of alleviate her. I mean, not to judge, she was probably very overloaded. But this was still prior COVID. Not to judge her, but this in particular, I mean, this is bad. So she would want them to not be healed. Or if they're healed, she wanted them out essentially. So
mm-hmm,
it would be a lighter burden for her, if you will.
mm-hmm,
So things like that, gets you thinking, is this for you? You don't want to be in here for the money. You want to be in here for the love
mm-hmm,
of God. That, and then I just wanted to mention that I've been to many countries and non-Christian countries. I've been to many Muslim countries, and they
mm-hmm,
flock to the Christian institutions, especially the medical institutions. They go to the education institutions, but they go to the Christian hospital. Indonesia, where Christians are 10%, Catholics like 3%. Someone
mm-hmm,
be there in the comments, so something like that. A huge minority. Muslims flock to their hospitals. In Pakistan, where Catholics are 0.3%, my wife is Pakistani, is Catholic,
mm-hmm,
0.3%, and the other non-Catholic Christians 0.7%, maybe a little more. Muslims go to their medical facilities. So you see this um,
mm-hmm,
worldwide, where the people are flocking to
mm-hmm,
the Christian and so not only hospitals but also like nursing homes, um,
mm-hmm,
orphanages, these kind of
mm-hmm,
other, we could say, secondary or branched out medical facilities, if you will,
mm-hmm.
are also of Christian heritage. So I just wanted to mention that. If you want
Mm-hmm.
to comment at that, good. If you want to go straight to
Yes.
future topics, the future
Um,
works.
I'll comment briefly, if I may. It is wonderful that you pointed out how in other countries, non-Christian, Islamic and or otherwise countries, people flock to the Catholic institutions because
Mhm.
they see something, they perceive something they don't find elsewhere. Uh, I'm not very knowledgeable about the condition in China,
Mm.
but from what I hear, this is one of the crises that China is experiencing in terms of their healthcare. Everywhere, aging is a problem. There's more older folk than babies being born, let's say that. And we see that in Japan, we see them in Europe, but in China, we see this very prominently as well. And China is not a religious country by definition.
Very good.
And what's happening here? They're very interested in the Catholic healthcare model. They haven't pinned down why it works, but they know it does. And I think the problem is they're not looking at the spiritual dimension. That's why they haven't pinned down what is the X factor, let's say, that makes a real Catholic hospital, function in such a efficient, beautiful, loving way than other healthcare facilities. We see the person as another Christ. And you can't accept that. You can't see that if you are so secularized, if you are so tunnel visioned to think about materialism only. So I think that's a little problem that many nations, and I don't want to put the spotlight on China only, but many nations perhaps are having. In terms of the healthcare profession being a vocation, if I just may add, it is so noble. And I would encourage people who are also listening to this or considering healthcare and listening to this to take the step forward. We need more Christian, we need more Catholic healthcare practitioners. We always will. So if you're listening to this, take heart. If you're already a healthcare practitioner and you're listening to this, you're stressed, you're overloaded, you're burning out, holding there, because we need you. Take care of yourselves. We'll be praying for you. And please be God's instrument of healing and love. It's such a noble vocation. And likewise with teaching, my maternal grandfather was a teacher at high school and also at what do you call it, college level, graphic art, technical school as well. And he would always say, well, I never actually met him, but through my mom, I know him. And he would always say, you don't enter teaching to be rich. You don't enter teaching to have nice things. You enter teaching because you love the other person and you want to educate.
That's right.
And I think that's a perfect parallel in healthcare. Yes, you can make money. The worker deserves their wages, of course. However, if you're thinking that healthcare is a profession that you just going to make money, that's not it. That's not the right intentions to enter healthcare. And I think if I may just quickly add, I don't want to overextend this, but if you can quickly add, there's also the issue of what is a profession, properly said, and what is a occupation. Everything now is a profession. This wasn't in the classical world. This wasn't in the medieval times. There was only 3 classical professions, and all have to do with the human person. I think that's a big clue. All have to do with the human person. So we have, as the number 1 profession, the spiritual, the priestly, the ministerial profession, because they treat the human person and specifically their souls. They restore their dignity by restoring the health of their souls through the sacraments, through confession, through other means, but that's what they do as priests. That's one profession. The second profession is law. Legal practice, lawyers. Why? Because they defend the dignity, the legal dignity of the person. They work with the person. Their product is a person, the defense. And thirdly, of course, healthcare, the medical, the physician, and to expand on that by extension, all healthcare workers. Because we don't produce a product either. The priest doesn't produce tables, doesn't produce pens or computers. He produces a restored human person. The lawyer produces the same thing, a restored, from the legal perspective, human person. And as healthcare workers, we produce a restored human person in terms of their health. So these, classically speaking, are the proper vocations and professions, I should say, professions. And not trying to demean, not trying to undermine, not trying to say that other things aren't good, other ways of life aren't good, other ways to make your living aren't good. if you're an accountant, if you are, let's say, a construction worker, if you are a book publisher. Um, these are all excellent ways of making a living. And we need everyone in society. We need absolutely everyone. But we also need to make a distinction, just like I make a distinction between curing and healing, we need to make a distinction between profession and occupation. In occupation, the output is a product. You're a construction worker, it's the buildings you make or the roads you fix. If you're an accountant, it's the bookkeeping you keep up to date. If you're a book publisher, it's the books you publish. These are the output.
That's right. That's right.
So I think if we have a better understanding of what profession and occupation is, I think we will have a better clarity on these issues of vocations and hopefully calling people who are of more noble spirit to take up professions like law, like healthcare, and particularly religious vocations.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, great. So, any future projects? And I wanted to ask you, we could wrap it up with this last question here to give you the last word. So, future projects on one hand, and on the other hand, I was wondering if you could chime in on this within Catholic Orthodoxy, kind of the problem of frozen embryos. What do we do with frozen embryos?
Yes.
Because it's you know, definitely morality is black and white, but we see it as kind of a grayish area, and there can be very difficult moral questions here. So, can women adopt, women who are not the biological mothers, can they adopt? Because there have been women, Catholic women, who have offered their wombs, we can say, for to adopt these frozen embryos, which I believe there are thousands of them. And I think they're principally made through in vitro fertilization or other processes where you have to make a bunch of embryos because there's a high failure rate of the process. So there's a lot of frozen embryos. So can that be done, or is that kind of participating in the intrinsic evil of the embryo being made in the first place outside, you know, like an extra sexual act outside of sex, we can say. So I wanted your opinion on that because I know there's good Catholics on both sides of the issue. And then also future projects, so we can kind of end with that.
So let me first highlight, this is the book we've been talking about, Curing and Healing, in Wood Press. So I'll be so glad and thankful if people can pick it up and have a good read. It's not very long. And you get much more insights than we can than discussed here. So please support me, and I think it'll be a good read for anyone. And you can give this to any nurse you know, any doctor you know, and I think it'll be something good for them to read in their spiritual life, and also any prospective medical students or so forth. I think it'll be a handy treat for them as well.
And links on the bottom in the comment section. Links in the comment section, just a reminder. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Before I go into future projects, I want to tackle that question the best I can. And that's a very tough question. I've heard, as you rightly point out, there are good, faithful, solid Catholics on both ends of the debate.
Right.
And this is what Catholics do. We see this in the church always. You know that it's Catholic when there's a lot of debate going on. And so to the question, there are literally not just thousands, probably in the order of millions of frozen embryos if you count everywhere around the world. We know that an embryo is a human life. So they're not a clump of cells. They're not just a product of a potential reproduction technique. These are human beings, very incipient, very premature, if I can use that term, but human beings with equal dignity nonetheless, just like you and me. I've heard it said that this dilemma is one without any happy solutions. Because either way, there's going to be some triple, but there's always going to be some evil. If you want to do one thing, there's going to be certain issues. If you do the other, there'll be other things. This is really a rock in a hard place situation. There's no happy solution here. And this is probably telling about the IVF and other sort of artificial reproductive industries and technologies, because if there's no happy end here, it's probably because there's I'm not trying to understate the pain of being infertile and the issues of infertility. And well, with infertile couples, we are praying for years. And I know that that is a painful situation to face. And for people who have been born because of these technologies, we love you. You're human persons just like us, and you have no guilt in the way how you were produced. So be happy, be joyful to be alive. God has come here to give us life in the fullest and enjoy that life to the fullest. But the issue is what happens with these frozen embryos. In each reproduction technique cycle, we have many because there's a high failure rate, as you alluded to. So the only way how science tries to go about this high failure rate is by multiplying your chances, having more possibilities. At least one of them is going to succeed, the hope is. But you're not going to implant all of them. So what happens? They're frozen. Some are given to scientific research. We have issues there. Some are just destroyed. Again, they're human lives, so we have issue there. Some are permanently frozen. We have issues there as well, because it's not very dignified to be in stasis for indefinite. So can a person, a mother, a family, sort of what you call embryo rescue, adopt an embryo from the frozen? I'm still developing my view on this. I must be entirely honest. I'm still developing my view. But at this stage, I would be inclined to say yes. I would be inclined to say yes. And again, there is no happy ending in either way. Every solution is sad because the whole situation in itself is lamentable. In embryo adoption, in this, as I put it, embryo rescue, at least for one embryo, the chance to be not frozen for eternity, they're rescued. They can be implanted to where they're supposed to be and develop, grow, be born, and have a regular life. And I think in this whole messy situation, and there's issues even with embryo rescue, but I think this is one potential and probably very valid and honorable solution. You're not going to save everyone. Even Christ didn't save everyone. When he walked on earth healing people, did he heal every single human on earth at that time? No, he only healed those who were more proximal in Judea, in Jerusalem, and only those who cried out to him. Not because he was unloving, not because he couldn't have healed everyone or cured everyone, but because there are sometimes priorities. And he had a mission, and his mission was the salvation of us, going to Golgotha and so forth. And so for mothers who are thinking about doing embryo rescue, for families who are considering this as a solution to their infertility, as a way to adding another loved one into their family if you already have children, I think this is a noble thing. Consult your pastors, consult your spiritual directors on this. But I think ethically speaking, at least from my perspective at this moment in time, I think it is a very noble act. You won't save everyone, but if you can at least save one, I think there's something good in that.
Yeah, that's you know, if you're interested in the near future, we can do a video on that topic because I see that you have a lot to say, and I could play a little bit devil's advocate, but I essentially agree with what you're saying, and I see
Mhm,
I still, other people see it as like a no-brainer, but I
mhm,
understand what you're saying that I mean it's not the optimal. The optimal would be that the
mhm.
biological parent would right actually
Correct.
finish the what you call gestation, I guess.
Mhm,
But yeah, if you would be interested, that's I mean that's definitely nothing the church has not ruled in favor of, but it did seem like
mhm,
Benedict the 16th at least was not he didn't jump the gun and for because there in Italy I've read there were a lot of women who were pro who wanted to it because there's more correct me if I'm wrong, there's more people who want to adopt than actually you know children who are
mhm,
were up for adoption. If I'm not wrong, that there's more people
mhm,
wanting to adopt. So the adoption lists are kind of like, so there are women who want to, so they would be saving a lot more
mhm,
than a few. But yeah, if you're interested, we could definitely talk about that because there's nuance
mhm.
involved. And but yeah, so any future topics, or if you want to address what I
Uh,
just said, you know, I don't want to leave you in there.
yes, I'll be more than happy to be at another moment, I guess, once again with you, Dr. Raphael, and we can discuss this and other issues in the
Yeah.
near future. In terms of future projects, as was mentioned in the beginning of this video, I recently completed my PhD um, from Catholic Theological College, University of Divinity here in Melbourne, Australia. A long journey. I started in the beginning of 2019 and finished only a few weeks ago. Officially finished a few weeks ago, or approved, or passed. So I have nothing to owe to university or anyone else. So that's wonderful. I'm just waiting for the ceremonial graduation next year. But the title and everything else the ceremony will be wonderful. I'm sure of it. I can't wait for it. But it's a formality, a beautiful formality, but a formality nonetheless. So my PhD thesis will be hopefully published. And this thesis will hopefully be published as well via INVOOT. We are in active negotiations at this moment. So there's no final word, but it's very promising. And the topic is on conscientious objection, particularly from the perspective of the abortion debate. I take the view from the Parliament here of Victoria because I'm located in Melbourne in Victoria, in Australia. However, the topic can be extrapolated to anywhere you're located in the US, in Europe, so forth. And it doesn't have to be necessarily abortion. This, I think the principles that I state and the things I make clear is equally valid for any issue of conscience in healthcare or beyond healthcare, but specifically healthcare, be that euthanasia, be that issues of how to deal with surgeries for gender change, sex change surgeries, how to address other issues, including vaccinations and so forth. So I think this is an interesting topic, if I may say so myself. And I think we need more discussion in terms of conscientious objection.
Mhm.
We see a lot of fire, a lot of battle, and I do describe it as a battleground in my thesis, the issue of conscientious objection, because we have very strong antagonists saying there is no room for conscientious objection in medicine. There's others who try to do a defense of conscientious objection, but unfortunately, sometimes they defend too much.
Mhm.
And what they're defending is not so much conscientious objection, but whims and preferences. So we need to be very sure what we're defending. We don't want to defend nothing or too little, but we also don't want to defend exaggerated too much.
Right, right, right.
And I think in my thesis, in the principles and the discussion I give, with the example of the Victorian Parliament here with the abortion debate, when abortion was debated and unfortunately legalized in our state here in Victoria, just over a decade ago. Um, the discussion was, we saw this in the parliamentary discussions. We saw that parliamentarians who were defending conscientious rejection sometimes in their effort, and it's a good effort, I'm not saying otherwise, but sometimes what they were defending was not conscientious objection, was other types of objections, but not conscientious objections per se. And of course, there's the other side of the debate, particularly being abortion, about how to balance that with women's rights and so forth. So very interesting. Hopefully it will be published soon.
Yeah.
And I'll keep you posted regarding that.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a video on that. That sounds really fascinating. I was just thinking when you first mentioned it, how can you write a whole thesis on conscientious objection? But now since you explained it, yeah, there's a lot there. There's definitely a lot there. I love that.
There is a lot.
With the mean, it's definitely a mean between two extremes, as virtue is. So yeah, excellent. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us in this video. Hopefully you reach to the end. Get Dr. Eric Manuel Torres' book on curing and healing. Again, easy read. It's not one of those thick books. It's a book you can easily, as he said, read in an hour. So very good. And until next time, God bless you all. And thank you very much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.